Welcome to Photoactive, a podcast about photography and technology. I'm Kirk McElhearn.
And I'm Jeff Carlson.
So we're recording this a few days after Apple's WWDC. I don't like calling it a keynote anymore because it's not a keynote like a keynote speech before something like the Macworld Expo, but Apple still calls them that. And they presented the new operating systems, the 27 operating systems, and they talked about a number of things. They talked about Apple Intelligence, they talked about parental controls, and they talked about tempering liquid glass, which I think we're all going to appreciate. But since we're a photo podcast, we're mostly going to talk about photos. Now, Jeff and I, we like to rant about things. I figured it would be nice to have a guest ranter today. So I want to welcome Craig Grannell, who's a tech writer like Jeff and I was saying before the show that we've all been writing about tech for almost a generation. Craig is in the same country I live in. Craig, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk about an article that Craig wrote in Amateur Photographer. But first, Jeff, is there anything we want to discuss that's not about photography in the new operating systems?
I don't know. I think maybe AI was mentioned once or twice.
Yeah, okay. But so we're going to talk about AI in relation to photography, right?
Right.
So yeah, they talked about the new Siri, and they promised all the stuff that they promised last year with the first new Siri.
Yes.
I can say that it does work a bit. I've installed the beta on my iPad, and it does work a bit. For instance, I was asking something about cooking bread, and I was wondering how long I should let the bread rise in my kitchen, and it told me that the temperature in my kitchen was between 21 and 22 degrees, which means that it got the temperature from my HomePod minis that are in the kitchen, and that's nice.
Oh.
So then when I asked Siri, what's on my schedule for tomorrow, it said, you have nothing in your calendar. What tasks do I have to do tomorrow? There is nothing in reminders. So it is partly baked, as always. It's only a beta. But I think we have the problem of them promising the same stuff they promised last year, and we don't know if it's going to come true.
Yeah, I feel like we're at the stage of all of this sounds very familiar, and we're just waiting to see, can this actually deliver? And to their credit, from what I've been hearing online from some people who have installed it, like on a new iPhone, also to point out, I don't have any machines. Well, sorry. My iPad will not run this, so I have an M1 iPad that can't take advantage of any of the new Siri stuff. I have an iPhone 17 Pro as my main device, but I'm not that crazy to put it on at this point. But some people, they are crazy and they have done it, and initial reports seem to be that this stuff is actually kind of mostly sort of working. And for a first beta, I think that's fine. But it will depend on, once it's released, how baked is it? And are they going to finally deliver on this promise?
Craig, are you a Siri user?
Not really. I remember the original Siri demo, the pre-Apple one, and it was quite exciting. And then I remembered the first Apple one, and that was quite exciting. And then I used it, and it was just like, yeah, fine. It doesn't actually do what I want it to. And all these years later, it still doesn't do what I want it to.
It's actually gotten worse over the years, I think, which is why this has become such an imperative for them.
Well, I think so, but there is also another angle to this, which I find quite worrying, and which also ties into the photography stuff, which is that Apple's pitch at the keynote or the video or whatever it is was, we are different. Everyone else has been racing ahead. We haven't, ignoring the fact that the reason they haven't is because they screwed it up the first time. But the problem I have with that is, okay, fine. So you're going to be different from everyone else. How? And their response is by basically doing the same as everyone else, but privacy. That's it. So it's like, we're going to do all the same things, but we're going to do stuff and we're going to respect your privacy. The end. Like, okay.
I think they're going to go further with the fact that Siri is going to be able to read all the stuff on your device to find your calendar events. So when you ask it, what am I doing tomorrow? It tells you, which doesn't work, but it knew the temperature in my kitchen. So that's a sign that it will be, I want to say, interfacing with the globality of my Apple expanded universe that I have here with all my Apple devices. I'm sure I've mentioned it here. I use Siri for very limited things. I use it for timers in the kitchen. Brilliant for that. Especially you can do multiple timers. I use it to control some of my lights, my smart home stuff. But I don't ask Siri for information because it always says either I can't find anything or would you like to look on the web or whatever. It's like, I'm not going to talk to my phone to ask simple things. Like if I do, I'll maybe ask for an exchange rate. I'll maybe ask to multiply some numbers or take a percentage of something. Really simple things. But for everything else, it just kind of limps along and doesn't give me anything useful. And I just don't like. I'm not the kind of person who's going to spend my time talking to my phone, my iPad, or my computer.
But also, is what it tells you going to be accurate anyway? So another
Yeah.
thing that was very telling in that video, the keynote, was there was no skepticism. It was almost like all of this stuff that Siri's providing to you in this new revamped version is fact, which is also how, of course, ChatGPT and all of the other LLMs have been saying all along. They've been like really confident and authoritative, but that's not the case. And I can't believe for a second Apple's is going to be significantly better than any of its rivals. So fine for what's the weather going to be like today, and it gets that wrong, whatever. But if you're asking it anything important, or if it's pulling things in from all your personal context and it starts screwing things up, or else like one of the things in the keynote where they went, hey, it can go through all your passwords and change them. And I'm just like, I'll stop
That made
there.
me freak out. Yeah.
It's just like, no.
Well, and also one of the responses was incorrect in the keynote. When the guy, I can't remember exactly what he was doing, but it said, you have this happening on this date. It said like Sunday, June 24th or something. And that wasn't correct. Like June 24th doesn't fall on a Sunday. I don't have it in front of me right now.
The music festival thing, yeah.
Even in their pre-recorded edited presentation, Siri gave a wrong answer.
That suggests two things. One of two things. Either it was accurate and he's just really planning far in the future for the next time when that day does fall correctly, or they weren't really sweating the details quite as much as they need to. What it does show is that you need to check every single thing these things pump your way, which erodes the efficiency that they're trying to build. So it's meant to make things faster, but you have to check everything just in case. So not great.
Yeah.
So I have a Claude Pro subscription and I use it for research, and I've told it to find authoritative sources, peer-reviewed sources, and I use this for articles. It always has links. I always check everything, right? So I asked the new Siri in the Siri app, which is basically plugging into Google Gemini. I asked it some questions, and I asked the same questions to Claude. And the results I got from Siri were, well, they're basically the free version of whatever AI tool you get. Whereas Claude, I'm paying £15 a month, and I get more extensive answers with links and citations, and they take longer because it's searching more.
I haven't had a chance to run this down, but I saw that actually it is not pulling information from Gemini. There's some report, and I'm sorry I don't have it at hand, but they use Gemini to train and build their models, but the responses are coming from Apple's internal private cloud models that they created, which I think is also very interesting because everybody's making that assumption. Oh, well, it's just taking all your requests and sending them off to Google and Gemini, and apparently that's not quite true. So I'm going to have to look into that some more.
It is a beta, so perhaps they're doing that now, and that as it progresses, they'll be doing it directly through Google Gemini. I've read that it's running on Google's cloud, but in a private cloud compute container or whatever it is. So it sounds like it's going to be Gemini, but it could be that right now they're not doing that. Anyway, let's talk about photography, because the most impressive thing here is Craig's article is titled, in my opinion, Apple is about to take a very dangerous step toward fake photography. Here's why. Bit of a clickbait title there, Craig, but you didn't write the title, the editor did.
Yeah.
So I did some samples using Playground, so it used to be Image Playground. And as everyone who's regular listeners to this podcast know, my ideal photo subject is Titus the cat. So I asked for 2 photos of Titus the cat. The first one was of him making bread in the kitchen. It's amazingly realistic. These will be in the show notes. It's amazingly realistic. It's just this side of problematic. If it wasn't a cat making bread and it was a person making bread, you might believe it. And the second one is Titus riding a skateboard. And Jeff said before we started, it's great that they found a skateboard the exact side of Titus the cat. What's interesting, if you look at the 2 photos, they were generated from the same photo in my library. So you will see that the face is the exact same angle. in both of them. Though the color of the fur is slightly different on the skateboard. It's orange, whereas it's brown in the kitchen, which is his true color. He's not an orange cat.
That could also be like its perceived lighting. And as someone who has tested Image Playground before and just found it to be sort of comical and slightly amusing, if you wanted anything remotely realistic, you had to push off to ChatGPT. But the quality of this is much better. It still has that kind of AI soft focus, not much depth of field kind of.
Oh, no, that's not true. Look at the depth of field in both of those photos, and particularly the one on the skateboard. You see the fall off looks extremely realistic, and there's a huge background blur behind him.
Sorry, I meant that in the sense that it has that soft look. It has that, what's the word? I can't remember what the word is for that blurry background.
That we don't like
that Kirk never wants to say. Anyway, there is still something about it that looks artificial to me, and not just it's a cat making bread. I mean, that does kind of give things away, but it is much better. I guess credit to that, but it also brings us really to one of the reasons why we're talking to Craig is because why is Apple doing this? Apple's not being as sort of playful. Here you can make an emoji and you can make a little cartoon version. Well, now we've kind of stepped into another realm.
Yeah, I think that's the problem I have with it. It kind of feels a bit like the realization in software of that very ill-advised advert they made where they crushed all of the creative things and said, well, here we go, here's the future, here's where we're headed. And like, fine, everyone else is doing it. Did you need to do it? And they'd probably say yes, because otherwise they're falling behind. But what Apple has actually created with the new version of Playground is an AI slop generation machine. That's what it is. They can talk about photorealistic stuff. They can talk about how great it is that you can take your family photos and play with them. And they've got that picture of the old woman on the skateboard as someone's background image. But it's AI slop. That's exactly what it is. And that's not going to be just used from a personal context. It's not going to be people just doing this themselves. People are going to use their iPhones for doing all sorts of stuff that will obfuscate and reality. We'll have uncanny valley. We won't know quite what's real. And that will be on millions and millions and millions of Apple devices now. So I don't personally think that's a net positive, even if you do like putting cats on skateboards.
Just one thing. The number of Apple devices that can do this is surprisingly limited. For the iPhone, it has to be an iPhone 17 Pro or later. So my iPhone 16 Pro can't do it. And apparently this is because it needs 12 gigabytes of memory. And the 16s and the base 17 only have 8 gigabytes. Initially, they said that even the Apple Watch 9 couldn't run watchOS 27, but it turned out that was a mistake. They're not paying attention to stuff. The data in that demo, getting things wrong on system requirements, that's not like Apple. But they are dropping a lot of iPads, they're dropping a lot of iPhones. Surprisingly, they're not dropping that many Macs. So a lot of Macs will be able to do this. But, the number of Macs compared to the number of iPhones is like, infinitesimally small.
But it also is a point to the future, right? So even if today a relatively small percentage of iPhones can do this, that's still millions and millions of iPhones. And then next year, more iPhones will be able to do it. And the following year, basically all of them will be able to. And by that point, these models will have got more realistic or, pushing further into uncanny valley, whichever way you want to put it. So this stuff is, depending on your personal perspective, only going to get better or worse. In my perspective, worse. In an Apple executive's better, obviously. So
I remember, was it just a year ago that Craig Federighi said something about that they don't want to make things that look realistic? I can't remember the exact quote, but he did something about why does Image Playground look the way it does is because we don't want to make things that look realistic and trick people, something like that.
Because they couldn't.
I mean,
it's that simple. They couldn't do it. So,
They could, but they weren't ready to do it, right?
There
were other companies that were doing it, but it wasn't good enough for Apple.
Well, they couldn't. They couldn't do it within their own system and their own way that they want to present things. So it amounts to the same thing. Whatever they kicked out into the world wasn't ready. Therefore, they said, "This isn't what we want to do." In the same way they always do. It isn't what they want to do until they kind of then say, "Hey, we've done this thing and we've invented this," even though others have been doing it for ages. And we're completely different, even though we're doing the same thing. It's really, really frustrating, especially in the photography side of things as well. So the changes in the Photos app, I think, are at least as bad as what's happening in Playground.
Yeah, if not worse. Now, we've talked a lot, and I guess we started talking, was it last year, about the cleanup feature in the Photos app, which is really wonderful. You get someone in the background, you get a car parked on the side of a photo and you want to take it out. That's fine. That's slightly changing reality, but not much. But Craig points out in his article about the spatial reframing, and he says the fact that you can alter a photo's composition, including its perspective after the fact, is really weird. The fact that you can do this even with photos that aren't shot on the iPhone, that it's creating its own depth map when it looks at a photo, and I haven't tried this yet. So you can spin people around and kind of, like not 360 degrees, but you can extend the borders, and we talked about Lightroom doing this a year or two ago, but also changing the composition and perspective is just weird.
Yeah, so my personal take on this is that there's a point where it becomes not okay. And the thing is, everyone, I think, has a point where they think it's okay with all of these photo editing tools. And mine sits somewhere in these new features. So the changes to the edge of the photo, fine, you should probably crop instead. But if you want to make a tiny little addition to the end of a picture, I'm not going to kind of go, you have ruined photography forever. Cleanup is a bit weird now because, you use it to take out a blemish, fine. But on the actual Apple demonstration, they were saying, right, here are 3 people in a photo, and we could have removed 2 of them as though they never existed. And it's like, well, you've literally changed the moment there. This is a completely different thing now. And then with the spatial reframing, I have actually tried this. I have a picture of a swan that I took the other day. It's a very nice swan sitting in a bit of field and all this sort of thing. And I'm kind of dragging it around, seeing how far you can spin it round, which is not that far, but it's a bit further than I thought. And then it took quite a long time to actually build this image. And I'm zooming in, and the fidelity of it is pretty good. There aren't that many AI tells. You have to look for them. They are there, but you have to look for them. But the thing is when you actually look into the details and compare the 2 images side by side, the AI one is obviously quite heavily made up. Like, it didn't happen. It's not real. It's computer-generated imagery that kind of fools you into thinking, well, if I had kind of changed perspective, this is what it would have looked like. And so, one of the things that really caught me in the demo that Apple made is the description that these features are super cool. And the guy was talking about this mix of bleeding edge tech, and it's amazing. And then there was this additional claim at the end: the results are consistent with the original scenes. And that just rang hollow to me because it's making educated guesses, and that's it. That's all it is.
But notice they didn't call it magical.
No, I bet they wanted to. I mean,
they so wanted to.
I don't think I heard the word magical once in those 80 minutes of the presentation.
I'm so sorry. You must have just collapsed, deflated out of disappointment.
Yeah, I had my alcohol set up to drink a shot every time they said magical, and I didn't drink anything.
You should probably be thankful that you didn't do that with the word faster. Otherwise, you would have been in hospital.
Oh, yeah.
This morning.
Oh, my God. First 10 minutes. So I wrote an article for CNET about this reframing tool, and I'm going to come at it from a slightly different angle, which is I do think it's super cool, but I think it's super cool in the technical sense. And I like the fact that it is a small modification. Well, I'm not trying to add things that weren't there or make those kinds of edits. I mean, one of the things that I like about Lightroom, for example, and its generative remove features, is that it's not trying to build something new. Technically, it is building something new because it's creating pixels out of nothing. But I like that it has some boundaries on it. And I will have to say I've not tried this out in person yet. And what Craig said about how much it had rebuilt is really intriguing. But I like the fact that this is something you can make a small adjustment and it will make a realistic change to reflect that adjustment rather than sort of going completely crazy. Now, I will say that even in a couple of Apple's own images, their sample images, there's one of a woman who's looking at the camera and there's like a building behind her, and they reframe it so that it's at a slightly different angle, and it has just rebuilt an entire building behind her that was before that obscured by her head. So if you know that spot, there probably is not a big white building in the background. So that starts getting to be more problematic. But if you just have something that's a modest change, you really wish you had just a slightly different change of perspective, I think it can be useful. But I say that with the giant caveat of we'll have to see exactly what the results are.
Well, there are two things there, aren't there? First, all of these tools are, I think most photographers would say they're fine when used sparingly and with specific concern to ensuring that things don't deviate too much from what was shot. But that's not how a lot of stuff is going to be used. And you also wonder, like, okay, at the moment you can probably shift with this perspective thing 10, 20 degrees or something. It's a fair amount. I've just done another one here with a picture of a Roman sort of amphitheater. And it's just rebuilt a chunk of Roman amphitheater around the edge that isn't there. And you think, well, what might happen 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line? If they take, there's a picture of your kids there. Can you go round the back of them, above them, to the side of them? Because this is the start of this. And I know it sounds, I'm not trying to be all tinfoil hat or whatever and slippery slope, blah, 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 blah. But from a photography standpoint, if your interest is in about capturing reality and presenting it at its best, there's a point where it does start to feel, as I put in the article, a bit weird. And with the experiments I've done, certainly with the reframing thing, it just feels a bit wrong to me if you do anything other than the slightest of changes. In much the same way, in fact, if you extend a photo a little bit, like a handful of pixels, it doesn't matter. Whereas I've done ones where I've experimented by dragging them out to a ludicrous degree, and it just kind of goes bang, 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 bang. Here's some random things that may or may not have been there.
I will also point out one thing that I don't know about these edits. And this is a tiny detail that I appreciate, but I don't know if it'll make a measurable difference, is that anything that is created by the Playground app that's 3D generated, Apple is embedding a synth ID. So there's an indicator that this is going to be an artificially generated thing, which Apple had been really absent from this whole idea of invisibly watermarking AI-generated stuff. What I don't know, and I don't think they've said anything, is if you do something like spatial reframing in the Photos app, is there going to be some sort of metadata, some sort of tag that says this has been edited with generative AI? I suspect not, because they can probably do it very easily with the Playground app and put in whatever metadata they want. But that needs to be present everywhere that you make these kind of edits. And I think the more difficult part now is how are you going to be able to see that? Because I think right now with a synth ID, you have to take an image that you suspect, upload it to a site, see if it's tagged with it, or maybe Photoshop can pick that out. I'm not sure offhand, but it's not going to be super clear that that's even been applied.
I just want to react to one other thing in Craig's article. This is a screenshot from Apple, and it's showing a woman who looks like Gwyneth Paltrow, and it shows her holding a large chocolate cake. And then give her a detective outfit in a dimly lit library. First of all, trench coat means detective, of course, and library background. And it's like, I find this more disturbing than the extend and replace. I find the ability to change the clothes they're wearing, the background, the context a bit more disturbing. Now, I'm sure that Apple's algorithms won't let you make nudes. I'm sure that they have that sort of guardrail there. But any way that you can alter a photo of what a person's wearing and where they are, that's just that I find that. I mean, I know it's sort of table stakes for these things now, but I find that wrong. I think I'm getting old and I should go live in a bunker someplace. But I'm very disappointed about where we're going with this.
It's also very interesting if you think about everything that was demoed, how that was introduced, and even how the other stuff was. So, the changing the perspectives was, here's a picture of my kids who I love, and I just wanted this picture to be a bit better. And with the other things in Playgrounds, it's mostly, oh, don't worry, it's just a bit of fun. You can imagine anything. You can imagine this weird thing. You can imagine you can take your own photos and you can play around with them. Oh, isn't this fun? This woman, you give her a chocolate cake and you put her in a library. It's just for a party invite. It's and it's about this kind of normalizing things for average people. Because when you start saying, actually, this is a bit dodgy, they go, well, hang on, it's just a woman with a chocolate cake and a trench coat, as everybody, that's how everyone celebrates their birthday, right? But it changes. I mean, apparently it is. I don't know. I've obviously been celebrating birthdays incorrectly, but it just makes everyone just kind of think this stuff. Oh, it's lovely, it's safe, it's throwaway, it's just a little bit of a laugh, right? And it isn't. It's a massive change into how we actually interact with all visual content in front of our faces.
Yeah. Now, I want to correct something. I found one photo where this is working, and it was a photo shot in portrait mode. Now, Apple did say this will work with all your photos. For some reason, it's only working with portrait mode. And so it's a picture of Rosalind the cat on the lawn in front of a little lion statue. And it's like it's extended her body in a non-normal way, right? It's like cats' bodies don't look like that. So I think I feel old saying this, but that we're in troubled times, that all of this is happening. I remember in Paris, early 1990s, I went to an exhibit, photo exhibit, and it was an exhibit about doctored photos going back to like post World War I and things in the Soviet Union in the 30s and other countries. And they were doctored in the ways that, maybe they'd cut someone out with an X-Acto knife, right? You could always tell that they were doctored. And these were used for political purposes. You have someone in the Politburo and he's fallen out a window and you want to take him out of all the photos, and they would do this. But now the ability to make these changes, whether it be photo unrealistic, like the memes that a certain inhabitant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue keeps posting on social media, or whether they are photorealistic, are really problematic for the future of society. And one of the big things that bothers me, for instance, in the UK, they're talking about banning social media for under 16s. I know Craig has a lot of opinions on that. I don't want to get into it. But the thing that I want to know is, why are they not forcing the tech companies to fix what's broken rather than doing this fix downstream to protect children? And governments have let this happen. Let's think back. It's only 3.5 years ago that ChatGPT was released to the public, right? It was October, November 22. So we're not even, okay, in internet years, that's 100 years, but this has gone so fast and governments have not done anything. And we need to be protected against this.
Well, there's also a side to it which isn't just about authenticity, and trust, but it's also about training how you interact with the wider world, which I know sounds like a very big idea. But when you think about all of this AI stuff, be it from Apple or anyone else, it's talking about essentially outsourcing your brain in the same way that a lot of people these days, and this is, something I do, so I'm not going to criticize, you'll outsource your basic math to a calculator. But this is like, well, surely you should be doing that for even the most basic social interaction. So one of the worst AI things I think I heard from Apple during the keynote wasn't photography. It was about messages being able to write things in different contexts and tones, depending on how it thought you would contact someone specific. And I'm like, So, that's everything now. So you don't want to write messages. You don't want to write emails. You don't want to look for things online when you're buying stuff. You don't want to do anything. You just want to outsource everything to this AI, which isn't you, without thinking. And you won't be curious about the world around you anymore. You'll just do whatever the stuff tells you. That, for me, is the real little scary thing here. And it does pervade out into the photographic space, into the image space as well. But it's kind of all of it. It's like this big holistic mess that just isn't feeling very good at the moment.
To be fair, Socrates railed about writing because that meant that if things could be written down, people didn't have to remember them. I went to school before calculators were allowed. I went to high school before pocket calculators were allowed. We had to learn how to do math. I don't care that I use a calculator anymore to do math. It doesn't bother me that this process, which is not enjoyable, can be done by something else. When I make bread, I use a KitchenAid stand mixer to knead the bread. I don't care that there's a mechanistic robot in my kitchen helping to make the bread. I think the bigger problem here is the way people perceive reality. And it's kind of like everyone's being dosed with some really good acid, and you're going to wake up and you're going to realize that reality is not what you thought it was, but you're not going to be able to tell what's real anymore.
You're also talking about the difference between mechanical tasks and critical thinking. So yes,
Sure.
I will use a calculator. And one of Apple's things in the keynote was about Safari, for example. It will, if you want it to, go through all your tabs and it will sort them for you into categories. Great, I'm fine with that. I don't particularly want to do that task myself. But if
Yeah.
it's like, well, it will then also head off and do all your shopping for you, or change all your passwords, or mess around with all your images, or all of these things, that's where it starts to get a bit weird, because you're outsourcing so much of what is you personally, not the things you don't want to do, but the things that you kind of should want to do. Why shouldn't you want to craft a beautiful note to a loved one rather than having the AI do it? Why shouldn't you want authentic, beautiful pictures of your family rather than go, well, actually, I think it'd be better if the background was completely different and that person wasn't there and the sky was a different color and, you know, the perspective was different and. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there are degrees with this stuff, and it's tipping in a way that's a bit too much.
And another problem with this happening so fast is that people aren't learning how to deal with it, not only detecting it, but how to control it. And I mean, kids are in school. ChatGPT came out, and kids were using this in school before the teachers had any idea how to use it. And they need to be taught how to use this, how to recognize what's real and what's not. Like the woman in the trench coat in the library, right? It doesn't matter that much, but what if it is someone else wearing something slightly different, say a t-shirt with a message, right? In a different context. That sort of stuff is really risky.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, going back to the idea of mechanical versus non-mechanical, let's take as an example, you want to go take a camera out. You want to do some shooting. Hey, cameras are mechanical. Taking photos is not easy if you want to do it right. There's all sorts of different factors and apertures and lenses and all that. Wouldn't it just be better to upload an old picture of your family and have something generated instead of going out and doing the work of taking a photo? And I think partly as photographers, we're like, well, no, nobody will do that because you want like a good picture of your family. But so many people would be more than happy to do that because they need to create a Christmas card by the deadline to get things published at the 50% off sale. And so they'll just kind of throw something together. It's going to be good enough. I think a big problem is a lot of this is going to be good enough that people will be like, well, I'll make an exception here. This is going to be good enough. And good enough, good enough, good enough, good enough. And then you realize, maybe I don't need to actually get up early in the morning and take a photo and drive somewhere and figure out where I'm going to go and make sure I have the right filters and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So I don't think that's just photography, though. I think this is a facet of AI is hollowing out the need to graft for creativity. And I went to art college, and I've heard for years and years and years people say, oh, well, I'm just not an artist. I'm just not a musician. I'm just not a this. It's like, yeah, because people who are artists have spent 15, 20, 50 years painting or doing sculptures or doing performances or whatever it is. Photography, you don't get to be a good photographer or a great musician or a great writer instantly. And I think the lie of technology, in a way, if you go all the way back, in fact, to the very start of computing, has been to suggest to some people that you can gain all of these skills instantly. So we should think, I like thinking of computing as a kind of a power up. It can kind of take what you've got and it can make it that bit better. But so many people these days, and this is partly down to social media, I think, partly down to the instantaneous access to information, they think it should be an instantaneous thing. I should be able to make a pop song with a prompt in 5 seconds. And then they say, well, why is that not as valid as your song that you spent 3 months making? You're an idiot. Spending 3 months, I did it in 5 seconds. And it's like, yeah, but it's not you. It's not your song. It's actually a remix of all this other stuff in training data. And fine if you're doing this for fun and you share it with a couple of friends, that's something. But then these things start going further than that too. They start sort of polluting all of the creative industries. They start removing work from creators. And so, again, that's where I start finding problems with this. And everyone's going to have their own line in the sand, as ever. But it's moving into a dodgy area, I think.
And we see this in our work as journalists, that a lot of journalists are being replaced because AI can do it, right? It can do it almost as well. I use AI for research. I do not use AI to write. I use Claude. It's really good for research, lots of sources, really deep, but I will not use AI to write. I don't need to. I don't want to. I mean, the writing process is, I don't want to say it's enjoyable, because sometimes I write articles I don't really enjoy writing, but there is a satisfaction you get when you've gone through the process and you've created something. The same as when I make a loaf of bread, it's the satisfaction of making it myself. Even if I fail sometimes, it's still better than the supermarket bread because I made it myself. Now, when I lived in France, you had bakeries everywhere, so you don't really need to make your own bread. You can get good bread wherever you live in the bakery, so it's a little bit different. But anything you make on your own, I see this in writing, in fan fiction a lot. So fan fiction is a surprisingly popular genre of fiction where people are writing stories based on characters, Harry Potter, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, whatever. And more people are doing this with AI, and some of the fan fiction sites are accepting it and some are refusing it. And it's creating hostility between the people who want to just generate fan fiction quickly and the ones who want it to be a process. The problem is a lot of fan fiction is really badly written, and at least the AI stuff is better written. And you could say that if you spend your time prompting every chapter and every character, you might have something better by AI than some fan fiction that's written by someone who doesn't have writing skills.
But then I suppose at that point, you're starting to head in a direction where you are steering it more. I don't think at that point you're steering it enough. Because from my point of view, I've been doing music and imagery and photography for years and years and years. I like surprise, happy accidents, the weirdness that comes from the act of creating. It's not that I love the drudge work in getting to the end. It's the fact that things will happen that I couldn't have imagined, and I created those. Versus generative AI is essentially averaging a whole bunch of stuff that already exists, right? But that doesn't to say that we could be in a space where, if there's enough control over this stuff and enough of your input from the starting point, that it wouldn't have some degree of authenticity to it. So I know people who do write with generative AI, and they write based on training data specifically only of things they have created. So, that it's not completely authentic. It's not something I do myself or would do myself. But I kind of get that there's a difference there compared to someone going to ChatGPT and saying, please write me 500 words on the latest iPhone, and then kind of saying, and that's all my own work.
No, it's true that if you build a database, so in Claude, I think they call this projects. You can upload a whole bunch of documents. So let's say you've got 100 articles and you say, write an article in the style of these articles, and it will use your style. It will use your phrasing. It will use your cadences. But it's still, I want to say it's dishonest. As a professional writer, it would be dishonest to bill a client for something that I did that way. Listen, we're almost at 45 minutes, and I know that some of us have to work today, Jeff, because Jeff has a real job. This has been really interesting. If anyone has any comments on this, you can go to our Facebook page and you can, comment, or you can email us. We'll put a bunch of links in the show notes to Craig's article. We'll include my cat photos, Jeff's article, and, well, any last words?
I'm glad you're including the cat pictures, obviously, because we need more cats on the skateboards, even if they aren't authentic, apparently.
Exactly.
I mean, honestly, just getting that out there is the whole reason for this episode. Let's be honest with ourselves, right?
This is a complete about face for everything we've just talked about, obviously.
Exactly. And I want to say thanks, Craig, for coming on. We really appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right. Until next time. Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening to Photoactive. You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. We couldn't afford the M. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/photoactivecast. That's photoactivecast in one word. You can subscribe to Photoactive in your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts. See the links on our website. And think about leaving us a rating or review in iTunes or in your podcast app.